Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of The Imperfect Cheerleader. My name is Jasmine Neely, and we have a very special guest today, Sarah Kim from SkimDietitian. As you all know, we've announced last week or 2 weeks ago that we have a registered dietitian on the Professional Cheerleader team. So we are so excited to have Sarah on to talk about SkimDietitian, to talk about your nutrition needs, to talk about what you need to be doing to prepare yourself to go out and do your best on your audition to live a better life just with your diet and nutrition. So I am so excited to have Sarah here, and you will be seeing a lot of her, so stay tuned for more. All right. So Sarah Kim is a registered dietitian nutritionist and personal trainer with a deep commitment to helping individuals achieve their health and wellness goals. She has spent the last 13 years in the fitness industry, from working as a tennis coach, rock climbing instructor, and personal coach. When she completed her Master's of Science in Nutrition and Dietetics internship in 2017, she went on to earn her dietitian license and spent time in a trauma one hospitals, Division One collegiate athletic facilities, and even managed upscale restaurants in downtown Chicago. After spending a few years learning how to operate a private practice, Sarah opened up her own practice, Skim Wellness, in 2023, and now specializes in combining the fields of sports nutrition, eating disorders, and holistic nutrition to her clients. When she's not working with clients one-on-one, she partners with fitness and coaching businesses like us to offer elevated nutrition and consulting services. Sarah is based in Charlotte, North Carolina, where she continues to inspire and empower others through her innovative approach to nutrition and wellness. You can connect with her on Instagram at SkimDietitian or Skim Wellness for more insights into her work and personal life. Welcome to the show, Sarah.
Thank you so much. I'm so happy to be here.
Yes, I am so happy that you are here. And I want to dive right into our discussion today. And I think we're going to talk a little bit about nutrition one-on-one, the basics of nutrition and diet. I don't even know the difference between diet and nutrition, but maybe you can go over that too. But it's so important as a dancer and just as a human being. And I first want to start off by you telling us a little bit about your upbringing in childhood, and if food and wellness was something that you were always interested in. And if so, then how did you find the interest? If not, then where did that interest come from?
Yeah, I think this is a great starting question. So I grew up in Denver to immigrant parents. My parents immigrated from South Korea and they met in the US. So a lot of my childhood was living in two different cultures. So when I was at home, I was living under my Korean like upbringing. And then when I was at school or anywhere outside of the home, it was like totally American. Um, So when I was growing up, because my parents were blue collar, they worked really hard to get us what we needed, and they sheltered us from a lot. But one of the things that they really emphasized, I think stems from their Korean background, but I think it's also just their general philosophies. They always emphasize that medicine is something that we go to if we absolutely need it, but our food that we eat, the nutrition that we provide our foods, that is our ultimate like medicine. Part of it, I think, was access. My parents didn't have insurance growing up, so it was hard for us to go to the doctor. So oftentimes when we were sick, my mom, my grandma, they would give us food as literal medicine, and we would use like Tylenol, Advil. Like I don't remember getting on antibiotics ever. I think maybe one time in high school for something small, but rarely did we go to the doctor. And because of that, when I went to college, I originally was like interested just in the science field, and I thought I wanted to be a doctor. So that's what I originally went for. And as I started like pretty early on into my education that in that direction, I realized that the approach that we're taught in like the medical field is you again, this is totally blanket statementing, but when you're given like when you go to the doctor, you are given like a prescription or you're given medication to address whatever is going on. And because of my own upbringing, it didn't really resonate with me as much. So I pivoted and went the nutrition route. And I've like loved it since. There's been ups and downs in the whole journey, but I think because of my parents and just the way that I was raised, like nutrition has always been something that's been like a focal point growing up. So I think I
Yeah.
carry that with me in my career.
That's so interesting because I think in American culture, it's so like, I mean, I know you said you grew up in a Korean household, but like you were still in America and you were
Mhm.
surrounded by American culture, as you said, like when you left your house, you were in, American culture. And I think it's fascinating because I feel like back then, a lot of times families didn't really focus on nutrition. It was about, how can you get the fastest meal of the day because life goes on, we got things to do. I got to drop the kids off. And I can't say that I grew up the same. Like nutrition, I didn't even think about nutrition like that. I mean, as a kid, you don't, but it's fascinating that you grew up like that. And I think it definitely it shows how different cultures view like what you put into your body and how it affects, your ability to function in the world. So that's really cool.
Yeah, and I think the other interesting part too, like cultures are something that interest me specifically. Studied anthropology in college as well. I was a double.
Mhm.
And one of the things in Korean culture is that instead of asking someone how are you, people often ask like, "Hey, have you eaten?" And that's the way that you kind of greet each other to make sure like everyone's taken care of. So I think just generally culturally, food is just a big centerpiece. And the other aspect of it too is like I think my mom, I respect her so much for this, but like when I'm preparing my own meals, I know that's something that we might talk about later today. But my mom, she cooked every single meal. She like I would eat out at the lunch cafeteria, at the school cafeteria when I was in school, like elementary, grade school, whatnot. But every other meal, breakfast and dinner and snacks, it was always prepared by my mom. She would have leftovers. Like, I don't know how she did it, but she
Oh,
did.
were you an only child or did you have brothers and sisters?
I was, but I grew up with two cousins who literally lived either right next door or like seven doors down. So we would always be in and out of each other's houses. So my aunt definitely played a huge role too in preparing meals and helping us out and stuff.
Wow, that's awesome. I needed to go to your house when I was growing up. So for dancers and people who don't know where to start when it comes to diet and nutrition, where exactly should they start? Like it's it's hard to pick out what to eat when there's so many options. When you go to the grocery store, you might be overwhelmed with what to get. Your brain might be telling you, "Ooh, I want this Cinnabon," but there's some, colorful fruits and vegetables over here that I should probably get. Like, what are some maybe 3 tips that you should give somebody when they're first starting out?
Yeah, so I think this is a really great question. It's usually one of the first questions that I navigate through, like my initial consultations with most clients. But typically, it boils down to three specific areas. So I don't always like to advise like what to eat per se because everyone has different preferences. So for instance, if you don't have a meat preference, like you're not going to feel good eating meat all the time. If you don't like broccoli, you don't have to have broccoli all the time. There's so many other vegetables out there. But generally speaking, I like to give people some sort of structure to follow when they're starting to like focus on their nutrition and diet. Especially as adults, we are, you know, we're adults, so we can do whatever we want. Our schedule doesn't always have a specific routine, unlike how many of us grew up as kids. As kids, your mom would wake you up, your caretakers, you would have breakfast, you would have specific meals throughout the day. You would have a specific sleep schedule. And honestly, our bodies really thrive off of that structure. And as adults, because we have that autonomy, we gravitate away from structure a lot of the times. And that ultimately kicks us in the butt. It's not good for us. So typically, I assess whether you're a dancer or not. I always assess what your meal timing looks like throughout the day. General guidelines for most, if you're trying to gain weight or maintain your weight, you ideally want to have breakfast within the first hour of waking up and oscillate between 3 to 4 hours between a meal or a snack throughout the day. I typically advise don't fast for longer than 12 hours overnight, but you do want to give your digestion a break overnight. Again, if you're trying to gain weight lose weight or maintain weight, 3 to 4 hours is what you want to ideally aim for. If you're trying to gain weight or even maintain, 2 to 3 hours, so more frequent small meals. So that's typically the first thing that I'll go over. And then what do you actually have at each of these meals? Typically, instead of giving you specific dietary, like these are the foods you need to have per se, I more so focus on the macronutrients. So are you having balanced, complete meals and snacks? And what that means is, are you having a source of carbs, protein, fat, and fiber at every single meal and snack? So generally speaking, for individuals who are new to this, don't stress yourself out. There are some resources on my Instagram that show this and illustrate this. You can also go to my plate. That's like the pure, like when we were growing up, the food pyramid was the rave from the government. Nowadays they use my plate. It's not perfect, but I think it does give a good like illustration of what your plate should ideally look like. You can also reference performance plates. If you Google image like performance plates, there's a lot of illustrations of what your like proportions should look like based on if it's a rest day, a light training day, or a hard training day. So, but if you're just listening to this podcast and you want like a general reference, I typically encourage people to start with a palm-sized amount of protein. So that's going to be about 3 to 4 ounces of protein every single meal, and about half that amount for snacks. Again, these are general guidelines, so everyone does need a little bit more individualization, but that one is a pretty good baseline to start with. So if you have that like as a framework, if 25% of your meals are coming from protein, ideally you want about 25% to also come from starches or carbohydrates. So like pasta, breads, crackers, rice, things like that. And then the other 50% should come from color or fruits and vegetables. So I think that generally helps people visualize, okay, this is the amount that I need for protein, same amount for carbs, and then twice as much for like fruits and vegetables. And then obviously like for fat, you're just thinking about, does my plate have actual flavor? That's a good general rule of thumb to follow when you're, assessing how balanced your plate is. And then the last component that I would suggest is hydration. So throughout the day, are you drinking water? Are you drinking soda? Are you drinking coffee? Generally speaking, I would say minimize soda, try not to rely too much on caffeine for energy, and focus on getting enough water in throughout the day. If you're wondering if you're getting enough water, a good uh, assessment at home is to just look at the color of your urine. So if it's very dark, you're definitely dehydrated. You need more water. If it's more clear, light yellow, you're pretty hydrated. So you're doing a pretty good job. Everyone's hydration needs really depend. So for instance, if you're in hot weather, if you're a heavy sweater, if you eat foods that have lots of water, there's lots of different factors. But like I said, if you use that quick urine test, that can be a quick, helpful guide to assess how you're doing.
Mm, that's good. And so you're saying if I take the palm of my hand, this part should be how big my protein should be. So whether that's like fish or meat or I guess a plant-based protein, that's how big it should be. And then for the fruits and vegetables, it should be twice that, right?
Yep, exactly.
And the starches would be the palm again.
Yep, exactly.
Interesting. Okay. Is the palm like equivalent to like a cup or I mean, I guess you can't really determine.
Yeah, so actually there are estimations you can use using your hand. So for instance, if you're measuring things out, your thumb is about a tablespoon. Some people's hands, like they're different sizes. So for me, like I need 2 fingers. That's about the right size. Some people, they could just use their thumb. Um, the 3 to 4 ounces, that's about the size of your palm, or another way to kind of standardize it is to reference a deck of cards. So a deck of cards is about 3 to 4 ounces. Most people's palm size is around that size. Again, if you're like tall, like NBA player, you might have bigger hands, so that might be a different story. But generally speaking, that's like what start with as a frame of reference because you're not always having measuring things. You don't always have a food scale around, so it's always helpful to have, a hand to like reference how much you should have on your plate when you're eating out and things like that.
Yeah, that's awesome. I'm gonna use my hands a little more and be like, hey, let me sit right there. I love that. I've heard that reference too, with like using your hand to determine your portion sizes, because let's be honest, in America, the portion sizes are insane. I've traveled, outside of the country, and I've seen way different portion sizes, and Americans, we love to eat. We love to eat.
Yeah, we want our money's worth for sure.
We want our money's worth, and we want some to go so we can eat the next day, okay? Let's be honest. So I appreciated that, I appreciate that. So give us a high level overview about what every woman like absolutely needs to include into her diet. The professional cheerleader is geared towards increasing women's confidence, and especially women's confidence in the dance and pro cheer world. So I think part of what increases somebody's confidence is what they put into their bodies and how that makes them feel. So is, just give us like a high level overview of what needs to be included in a woman's diet.
Yeah. So I love and hate this question, to be honest, because um
I
it
know you don't like to give specifics.
Yes, exactly. Everyone is so individualized. So if I give broad strokes of recommendations, sometimes people, take things out of context. So a disclaimer, when I mention these tips, just these are generic tips to consider. But if you're working with a dietitian or a coach, like make sure you're individualizing these general broad strokes of advice. So first advice I would say, especially for the dancer, pro, cheer, like population, in my experience working with these types of athletes, you're very, very highly motivated, and I think you're very competitive as well. And oftentimes in the last decade, I think a lot of women specifically have become afraid of carbs, specifically. People think that if you eat carbs, you're going to gain weight. It's not going to be good. It's going to cause you to be lethargic. And there's a lot of myths in that. So, just generally speaking, your brain alone needs at least 130 to 150 grams of carbs in a single day. And that's without movement, that's without, like working out. For those who don't know, carbohydrates are your body's main source of fuel or energy. So if you cut out carbs, um, you're not going to have much energy. And that's what I warned about earlier, hydration. Like a lot of women tend to focus on, oh, I'm tired, I'm going to have a cup of coffee. But if you find that your energy is constantly low, are you having enough carbohydrates or fuel or energy for your body? Are you constantly needing to sleep or feel like you need to rely on caffeine to get through the day? If that's you, and I see this a lot in women, potentially increase your carbs just a little bit. Yes, like carbohydrates is something a lot of people need to be careful of, but avoiding them entirely is not necessarily the solution, especially for like an athletic population. Carbs are going to be what's going to help you last the full like game when you're like cheering on like a hot field. You don't want to be like low energy, and it's going to impact your mood and whatnot too. So carbohydrates, I just really want to emphasize first. Second is protein. I think people generally know because of like the trends nowadays that protein is important, but protein is your body's main like building block for muscle. And I'm not just talking skeletal muscle, the muscles that you see on your bones, but it's also your internal organs, your brain, like I said. Every single day, your body turns over like muscle. So basically, it means that your body breaks your muscles down, and in order for your body to recuperate and build the muscle back up, your body needs a good adequate amount of protein every single day so that it doesn't lead to increased risk of injury or atrophy where your muscles shrink in size over time. So, generally speaking, The RDAs, which is what's given by the government, the recommended daily allowance for protein is about zero point 0.8 grams per kilogram of body weight. But there's a lot of research nowadays that shows that that's actually not enough. And especially for the athletic population, you need more, at least 1.2 or more. So
Mhm.
if you're looking at your dietary intake overall and you're thinking that you don't have enough protein, maybe you focus on a vegetarian diet. You can still get enough protein, but with supplements or legumes, soy, there's lots of different options out there. But you don't want to skimp on protein because it's what's gonna build your muscle, give you strength and that definition that everyone wants. And people also are going to feel more satiated throughout the day. So if you're only eating like carbs or like fruits and vegetables, you're not going to feel as satisfied. So you're always going to feel snacky. So make sure you have enough protein and it'll definitely help with that snacky feeling. Um, and then I have a couple of like micronutrients that I always like to focus on specifically for women's health. A lot of women, especially if it's if you live in an area that has seasons like winter and things like that, you're not going to see as much sun. And so a lot of women experience like seasonal depression. Vitamin D can be really helpful for that, especially like I know for dancers and pro cheerleaders, you guys are going through auditions during the fall and winter. So making sure you have enough vitamin D to help with your mood can definitely help. Omega-3 is also something that I always push for a lot of my clients. The American diet typically has more omega-6s than omega-3s in their diet naturally, so you want to supplement with omega-3s. Magnesium is something that many people are deficient in. It helps with better sleep, helps with digestion. So you can't like I mentioned supplements because you can supplement, but you can also focus on foods that are rich in these ingredients too. So, for instance, vitamin D, there's a lot of like dairy products that are supplemented with it. Omega-3s you can find in nuts and seeds and fatty fish. Magnesium, like dark leafy greens, is something that I focus on for magnesium. And then just a couple others to like add on, like B vitamins for energy, or especially if someone is vegan or vegetarian, B vitamins is something that you want to be mindful of. Calcium and iron can also be something that someone might need to be attentive to. So just a like that's not an extensive list, but that's generally where I like to start to make sure, hey, how are you doing in these categories, and go from there.
So is there okay, so you mentioned some vitamins.
Yeah.
Is it is there a point where you're taking too many vitamins at once?
Yeah. So there's something called the upper limit in nutrition where your body starts to feel the toxic effects of certain vitamins and minerals. So just like my model for everything is everything in moderation. So if you have too much of something, it's going to start causing issues in your body. This goes the same with like traditionally healthy foods or unhealthy foods. So to give you an example, if you have too many sweets, we all know it's gonna cause like cramping, like digestive upset. You're not gonna feel your best. But same thing with like broccoli. I'll just pick on broccoli today. If you have a whole bag of broccoli, you're probably gonna feel really bloated and gassy, and you're not gonna feel great. So that's the visual that I like to describe when describing micronutrients like vitamins and minerals, because same thing, vitamin D, omega-3, magnesium, those things are all good for you. But if you have excess amounts of it, that's also not going to be good. So, um, every micronutrient has a specific, some have upper limits, some actually don't. They don't actually cause toxic levels in the human body. But you can always Google it, or use AI to look up these upper limits of values. Generally speaking, if you are eating a diverse diet in America, because everything is fortified, most people are going to be in a good spot with micronutrients. There are certain populations that might run into risks. So, for instance, if you're vegan or vegetarian, you might not get enough B6 or B12, so you might need more. That doesn't mean to have as many B6 and B12 vitamins as possible, because again, you might reach an upper limit. There are labs you can do to double check if you're reaching that threshold, but not everybody needs to be paying money for those tests per se.
Yeah. Okay. No, thank you for saying that. I yeah, I just came to me. I was like, if I'm taking all these vitamins, there has to be like some type of issue, if you're taking too much at once. But I also want to go back to something you said earlier about protein. And it is like really big in the fitness community and just athletes in general. Can you tell me the difference between whey and pea protein and like the protein powder? Like I know whey is a little bit more calcium based, I think, but I want to hear it from the dietitian.
Yeah, so there's lots of different protein powders out there, but the gold standard is honestly whey protein powder, whey and casein specifically. So those are both from like dairy or cow's milk, and it's going to be a complete protein powder. So what that means is that your body needs 8 or 9, I can't remember, 8 or 9, I think it's 9. Oh gosh, let me look this up because I don't want to misspeak.
Okay.
But it's called essential amino acids.
Oh, okay.
And whey and casein protein powders. Um, hold on.
I feel like essential isn't essential the ones that you naturally get from food, and the non-essential the ones that you have to take supplements for.
Yes, exactly. So there are 9, just to double check.
Yeah.
So with the 9 essential amino acids, whey and casein protein powder are always going to have all 9. So you're not gonna need to go elsewhere to supplement. If, for instance, you were using like pea protein powder, it doesn't have all 9 essential amino acids. So oftentimes you'll find that vegetarian or vegan based protein powders will try to combat that by combining different plant protein powders. So, for instance, a lot of the combinations gear towards pea and rice protein blends, and that'll help provide the full 9 essential amino acids that you need to replenish your body's protein needs. The issue with plant-based protein powders, though, is that they are not as bioavailable. So oftentimes you need twice as much in order to reap the same benefits as whey or casein protein powder. So that's the brief overview. It's just, is it animal-based or plant-based? And typically, if you're able to digest it and tolerate it, I always suggest whey protein powder because of its completeness and bioavailability. Now, the difference between whey and casein, whey is fast digesting. So typically that's the protein powder that you want to use when you're finishing working out, when you're eating throughout the day. But then casein, it's slow digesting. So overnight, our protein again like gets uh broken down in our bodies naturally. And to help combat that, a lot of athletes will use casein at night to help reserve some of that muscle mass without it like deteriorating overnight. So timing wise, that's what I would suggest between whey and casein. And then again, if you're considering, should I get a whey protein powder or pea-based protein powder or rice, there's lots of options out there. Generally, the only reason I would suggest someone to be on a rice or a pea protein blend is if they can't digest it, like if they're having digestive issues or a lot of bloating, maybe they have a dairy allergy. Um, but you just need to be a little bit more strategic if you go that route.
Got you. That is very interesting, and I did not know that any of. Well, I knew the pea was plant-based, but the whey and the difference, I think hearing your perspective is very helpful, and I'm sure it's going to help somebody else out there when they're trying to decide. Because I right now I use a plant-based protein, and I use that because I thought it was more, health is healthier for me. I don't have like I'm not lactose intolerant or anything. I don't have like a dairy issue, but maybe I'll go back to whey protein, maybe to get those non-essential amino acids. So thank you.
Yeah. Yeah, of course.
Okay, so I want to go through a little scenario and let's say I'm auditioning a week from now. What should my diet leading up to that audition look like? And what are some things that I should eat to plan my body for the best, toning results that I can look good in my two-piece uniform or outfit, and I can have the best energy as well.
Yeah. So I love and hate this question too because diet is something that I always encourage people to work towards sustainable habits. But I totally get for competitions, auditions, we want to look and feel our best. And sometimes when we use diet strategically to look our best, we may not always feel our best. So when like considering this question, I thought about it a lot, and I just wanted to, mention like I don't like encouraging crash dieting. I don't like encouraging like quick fixes. So if you're constantly resorting to, hey, before an audition, I have to like, I don't look or feel my best, what do I need to do? If that's your mindset, I would ask, hey, like for the future, like for now, sure, do what you have to do, but consider what can I do to prevent crash dieting habits in the short term every single time. So that's something that I always really want to encourage. If you're constantly resorting to that, let's look at your habits. Like what's going on here that's not letting you get to your best by like several weeks from your audition, if that makes sense.
Mhm.
Um, so that's one thing I want to stress. But generally speaking, I would encourage following an anti-inflammatory diet. Typically, if you want to look toned, you don't want to feel inflamed, and you don't want to be holding on to water weight. So if you focus on foods that are more anti-inflammatory, lots of fiber, lots of color, that's definitely going to help you.
What kind of foods are those? Like, can you
Yeah,
give an
so
example?
generally speaking, it's gonna be like fruits and vegetables for the most part. Lots of lean protein, healthy fat sources. Another way, like a lot of people will push the Mediterranean diet. It's not that that's the best diet. There's just a lot of research studies on it, but it focuses on a lot of foods that are high in omega-3s. Like a lot of the things that I've already talked about, it emphasizes those specific nutrients. So just look at your like visual of your complete meals and snacks that I referenced earlier. Do I have 3 to 4 ounces of lean protein? So things like chicken or like if you wanted to do like fish, try to like sometimes you'll hear you want to focus on fatty fish like salmon. But sometimes like for digestion, too much fat in your diet can also lead to just retaining more water weight at times. So I would focus on lean protein sources as much as you can. If you're getting like ground meats, try to opt for the leaner versions. Um, so once you figure out the protein, then do I have a 50% of my diet coming from like fruits and vegetables, and try to focus on the ones that don't cause a lot of gas. Um, you'll hear something like FODMAPs get thrown around, and like everybody should be able to tolerate FODMAPs. They're basically prebiotics. It's actually good for your gut. But sometimes if you have FODMAPs in excess, or if you have like dysbiosis in your gut, sometimes it can lead to bloating or gas retention. So if that's you, sometimes you might need to be careful around FODMAP vegetables and fruits. So some examples of FODMAPs are like apples or broccoli. I keep picking on broccoli. Um, but it doesn't mean that these foods are bad, but they can cause a little bit more gas for some individuals. So if that's you, individualize your specific protocol. Um, and then obviously like you still want some carbs before your audition. Like you don't want to be low energy per se. So make sure you have carbs that aren't overly processed, that don't have too much sugars in them. So generally like whole grains are what I would encourage. At least for that specific week. Ideally, like you want to build to sustainable habits around this, but again, that's definitely what you want to focus on that week before. And because you want to avoid retaining water weight, ideally you want to watch how much sodium you're consuming. Most Americans consume way too much. So if you're watching sodium and fats, like specifically trans fats and saturated fats, it'll help you feel your best and look your best for audition day. Um, I think I have maybe like two more things to add. Like one would be avoid carbonated beverages, so and caffeine because it's going to cause like more water retention and bloating. And then some people might be listening and might be curious about like water cutting. You'll hear a lot of that in like aesthetic-based sports or like bikini bodybuilders. They'll use this tactic a lot right before their peak week. They will go through a process that's about a week where they basically water load. They increase their water intake significantly, um, up to maybe 1 to 2 gallons a day. And then this will encourage your body to start flushing out excess amounts of sodium and water. So people probably start that maybe 5 to 7 days before on audition or before their competition day. And then maybe about 2 days before audition, they'll gradually reduce water intake to about half a gallon or so. Then one day before audition, you might limit water to like sips throughout the day just to stay hydrated enough to not cause dehydration. And then the day of audition, once you've like cut down on the water retention, you'll ideally just sip water as needed and avoid large quantities at once to maintain that lean appearance. Um, as you do this process, though, like I don't always like to go through this process with many of my clients because it's gonna limit your ability to eat throughout the day. If you're drinking 1 to 2 gallons of water, that's a lot and
Yeah.
it's intense. So I mention it because some people might be interested in it and it is something that you could look up online, and I'd rather have you hear like my like thoughts and opinions about it. I don't encourage it for most individuals. I know people go through it and it does like give you that lean physique, but it's again something that's similar to a crash diet, and I'd rather have you work towards sustainable habits, something that you could do long term rather than constantly resorting to like these types of methods to like look your best. But again, if you look your best, you might not feel your best, you might not perform your best if you're that dehydrated, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I think sometimes that could work, like you said, in like the bodybuilding or aesthetic based competitions. Um, but for a dancer, you're like exuding a lot of energy when you're dancing and you're like doing a hit workout basically for like a minute and doing a routine. So I think, yeah, that the crash like water diet that you were talking about, I don't know if that's the best thing for a dancer. Maybe if you maybe I feel like maybe I've done that when I did like photo shoots and stuff. So I look my best and look toned in my photo shoot, but I don't know about I don't want anybody getting dehydrated to your point. Yeah.
Yeah. So I just wanted to mention that because I'm
Yeah.
sure people listening might be like, oh, what about this? Why didn't you talk about that? Well, I
Right.
mentioned it because I don't encourage it,
Yeah.
especially for like dancers, like you said.
Right. So you said so the thing that they should eat right before or the day of the audition, like would that be kind of like a pasta or like you said whole grains the day before? What about like the morning of?
Yeah, so remember fuel is carbs. So typically, if I'm working with the clients, for instance, everyone digests different things, like a little bit differently to not to be redundant, but for instance, like my personal preference for before workout or pre-workout is like applesauce. I digest it really well. It doesn't sit in my stomach. I don't feel it as I'm jumping around. For
Mm.
other people, it might not sit as well. So typically for like several weeks out from the actual audition, I'll trial, hey, what do you feel best with? How much energy do you have when you eat this food versus that food? But typically, you want to focus on simple carbohydrates before your actual like audition. So, like Jasmine, walk me through like a typical audition day. I know it's pretty extensive, but it's
Yeah.
like several hours long. So I'll tell you the timing based on what you tell me.
Yeah, I think it's different for every like audition or team, but usually you wake up, you know, you have a couple minutes when you get there, you have a couple minutes to warm up. Usually, the warm up and stretch, and then usually it's like audition time. If you're learning, then you warm up and stretch, and then you learn dances. But if it's like audition day, it's like the final day for you to perform, then you usually show up, you audition or you stretch, you warm up, and then a lot of times you might be sitting there waiting for your chance to go. So, sometimes you have to like you're just sitting there and you're just idle, you're not doing anything. Um, and then after that, after you dance, sometimes you might have it depends on the audition, but you might have other dances after that too. So it could be a long day or it could be very short.
Yeah, so I would honestly, so let me just go over timing and then kind of suggest based on that schedule. So
Mhm.
essentially, before you're working out or moving your body, you want to fuel your body with like simple carbohydrates about 30 minutes before. So for instance, throughout that audition day, if you know you have an intense routine coming up, time it so that you have something like applesauce or a granola bar, a piece of fruit, something like that simple, that's easily digested, that'll sit well while you're jumping around, 30 minutes before that routine. Then ideally after you work out, you want to have a ratio of 3 to 1 or 4 to 1 carbs to protein. You actually need more carbs than protein as you're like replenishing your body after a workout. So let's say you have an intense dance routine, or maybe you've been moving your body for like a while and you have like a quick break. Ideally, you would get in like a meal, like that complete meal that I referenced. But if you only have time for a quick snack and then you have to go again, then again, focus on replenishing with simple carbohydrates and some protein to keep you going. And consider some electrolytes too, because if you're like sweating, you definitely want to be replenishing with sodium and potassium as well. Um, if you are moving your body more than 60 minutes, then I would definitely encourage you to have like several snacks with you so that as you're continuing to move around, your appetite's not going to be great. You're probably not going to be able to stomach a full meal. So having those like quick meal or quick snacks to keep you going for as long as you can is going to be ideal. Like how long was your like longest audition day?
Oof. Probably from like 6 a.m. to 2 or 3, maybe 6 o'clock in the evening.
Yeah, that's intense.
12
What did
hours.
you do
Yeah.
for like food during those days?
What did I eat?
Yeah, what'd you do? Do you remember?
Oof, I don't remember. I think I had eggs in the morning. I think I had some eggs and some fruit. Um, I think they actually fed us during, yeah, they did give us like a lunch. But I brought some snacks. I brought like maybe a banana or some fruit. Um, Definitely had some water and electrolytes, I believe. Some like liquid IVs and stuff like that, Pedialytes. So yeah, that's all I really remember. But I do remember throughout the week, I would eat like a rotisserie chicken, some broccoli, and some rice. Like that was my dinner every day throughout the week. So yeah, that's what I did.
Yeah, and like that's a balanced meal. It has fiber, carbs, and protein. And ideally it would have like a source of like fat. So like maybe if you could have added like some avocado or olive oil while you're cooking, that's a great way to too.
Mhm.
Um, but generally speaking, I think you did a really great job. Like you, for any listeners, like I just want to encourage people to bring snacks with you. You don't know what your like um setting's gonna be like, so you always want to be prepared. And make sure you're prepared to eat regularly throughout the day so you don't get too fatigued towards the end of the day, especially with such a long day like that.
Yeah, for sure. Thank you for that advice. So, just a couple more questions. I want to know, you said something about like carbs. Women don't really like to talk about carbs or eat carbs, and that's like a myth that they should stop thinking about. Are there any other myths that you can think of that women should stop believing when it comes to diet and nutrition?
Yeah. Oh, there's so many because of social media. I love, again, I have a love and hate relationship with a lot of things. Social media is great. But when it comes to nutrition, like I think everybody's posting their ideas and their like experiences with nutrition. And nutrition is such a complex topic. I always tell my clients that even though we know a lot about nutrition, I would say we know like 5% of what we should know. There's so many things that we actually don't know, and that's partly why there's so many conflicting advice out there. Um, but when you see things on social media, I think some things that I've seen a lot are like intermittent fasting is really popular. Or like ketogenic diets. Some people are concerned about like cycle syncing. I've seen a lot of, or I've also seen people talk a lot about like cortisol and how that's negative for their health, or even like blood sugar spiking. Like after you eat, oh my gosh, my blood sugar is spiking. That's not good. Well, let me tell you, when you eat and you eat carbohydrates, your blood sugar is going to spike. That's naturally what's going to happen. The issue with like blood spiking is if the blood sugar doesn't come down within a certain time frame, that's when it becomes a problem. But I listed off a couple like trending topics that I could talk a lot about. Is there anything that piques your interest?
I want to talk about the intermittent fasting.
Yeah.
I feel like naturally, and so it's something that I do naturally, is intermittent fasting, and like sometimes I can go a whole morning without eating, And I don't know if that's just a problem or like, maybe talk a little bit about that. I do notice that when I drink coffee, it curbs my appetite and I don't eat a lot, but I've been trying to stay away from coffee lately. And so, but I could still go like a whole morning without eating. Like, what is that? Can you talk a little bit more about intermittent fasting?
Yeah, so intermittent fasting is really popular in the fitness community because it's a really effective way to cut down on calories. And there's a
Mhm.
science behind weight loss, right? Calories in, calories out still holds true. Yes, there is metabolic adaptation where your metabolism might slow down or speed up based on like your dieting habits and exercise patterns from the past. It could also be influenced by your genetics and lots of other factors. But when you are focusing on um, cutting down calories to a specific window, an eating window, it's going to impact your hunger and fullness cues throughout the day too. So when I mentioned earlier, hey, I usually encourage people to start eating within the first hour waking up and eat throughout the day. A lot of people, when I mention that, they kind of freak out. What? Like that sounds so polar opposite of like what I've heard is effective, which is intermittent fasting. And the reason why a lot of people claim, and including myself, like I used to say and still do sometimes, I don't always feel hungry in the morning. That's often a complaint that I hear from a lot of clients. Part of it is because you're not used to eating breakfast. So if you're not used to eating it, your hunger and fullness cues adapt to your eating cycle. So if you put yourself on a structure where you're eating regularly throughout the day, it'll A, help your digestion, B, help your metabolism, and C, it'll just help you have better energy throughout the day. But if you're intermittent fasting, you're basically eating all of your like days worth in one sitting. It can negatively impact your digestion, energy, and mood, and all the things that I just said are helpful for regular meals throughout the day. Again, it works for people. Like I don't always say everybody has to be eating a specific way. Everyone has their preferences based on their life circumstances, on their context. So I usually work with each client. If intermittent fasting is working for you, great. Let's utilize that. But also, let's see if it's actually helpful or it's something that you're doing because you've done it for a long time and it's what you're familiar with. I think when it comes to recommending intermittent fasting for athletes specifically, I don't, definitely don't, because um, we're not here to necessarily lose weight. We're not here to like for some sports, yes, it could be about like changing your body composition. And honestly, if an athlete is interested in that, that happens during the off season. But when you're trying to enhance your performance and like make the audition, ideally, one of the things that you're being evaluated on is your actual performance, how much energy and like how much of a force you are on stage. So in order to support that, you ideally want to be eating regularly in small, frequent meals rather than letting all your energy kind of like fizzle out until you eat again. And when you eat big meals like that, it your body stores it. So rather than utilizing it quickly, it's gonna store it into like energy stores, and again, it's gonna impact your body composition, potentially impact your energy levels. Um, I feel like a broken record, but does that make sense? Did I lay it out clearly enough?
No, yeah, you did. I think it's really, really important to know that, like, especially as an athlete, like you can't like deprive yourself of all those nutrition because your body needs it to perform. Now I want you to talk about your diet and how you eat and prepare meals each week. Like, what do you base it off of? Like, what is Sarah's diet like?
Yeah, so right now, I literally try my best to follow the advice that I have laid out for all of you on this podcast. So I try to wake up and I try to work out in the mornings. So typically I work on getting in my pre-workout snack. Applesauce is my favorite. Sometimes it'll be a piece of fruit, sometimes it'll be like yogurt and some like granola on top of it. And then after I work out, I make sure I get like a good like breakfast in because again, my routine is a little different. I have my breakfast after so that I don't have that huge meal sitting in my stomach while I'm running or whatnot. Um, Generally, my breakfasts could range from like leftovers from the night before. It could be cereal. It really depends on what I'm craving and what I have access to and what I have meal prep for the day. Um, Then a few hours later, I'll have lunch. Typically at lunch is when I have the most of my like veggies, just because I am home, I'm working from home, it's easy to access my fridge. Versus at night, I might be out and about doing things. So I always try to make sure I get enough veggies during the day when I am home and in front of my refrigerator.
That's a
So
good
I'll
tip.
eat a lot of, what was that?
I said that's a good tip to
Yeah.
eat a lot of your vegetables at lunch. Yeah.
Yeah, ideally, like, you want to spread out the majority of all of your macros throughout the day. But for me and my routine, I just know that if I don't get enough in earlier in the day, I'm gonna be out and about and I'm not gonna have access to veggies. So that's just how I balance out my lifestyle. So this is where like the personalization like comes in. And then for like lunch, because I focus on more veggies, I'll eat a lot of like salads in the like summers. Right now I'm on a spring roll kick, so I've been eating a lot of veggies mixed, like wrapped into like spring rolls or rice paper. I'll use like different sauces. Like when people eat their veggies without like a dip or sauce, I'm like, how? That the sauces are what make the veggies so interesting.
Vegetables, really?
Mhm. So for
Yeah.
instance, like for my spring rolls, I'll put like peanut butter, I'll put hoisin sauce and sriracha sauce in it. Those are my three sauces that I'll put in. Some people even put like pineapple sauce in it, and it's really good. Um,
Are your spring rolls they raw or are they cooked?
oh, they are raw. So like
Mm.
spring rolls, what I'm talking about is like when you go to like a Vietnamese restaurant and they give you like the spring rolls that are like clear.
Yeah.
That's what I'm talking about. And then I think some people will call them summer rolls. But the other one is like the egg roll type looking thing. I'm not a
Right.
huge fan of those. Like texturally, I just don't like them. I know some people do. I just don't. Um, but yeah, so I'll have you had rice paper before?
I think yes, I have.
So they're my favorite. Like there's so many things you could do with them, but literally you just wet it with like sink water, whatever you want, and then you put in whatever veggies. I typically like to use like grilled chicken. For meal prep, I know circling back to that very briefly, I tend to have marinated, like, cut up chicken in the fridge, like, at all times. So I'll go to Whole Foods or the grocery store and I'll dice up my chicken, put it in like salt and pepper and some like cooking oil or olive oil, whatever. Sometimes I'll use different seasonings, but that way I have easy, like, accessible chicken for whatever I want throughout the week.
There's a if you go to Aldi, I don't know if you shop at Aldi, but
Yeah, I love Aldi.
Aldi, they have like these packs of like rotisserie cut up chicken. And
Oh,
yeah, so you don't have to go to and slice them up, but yeah, if you go to Aldi, they have like the sliced up chicken that I use sometimes. I use like I put in like little lettuce wraps and I put like cheese and not avocado, guacamole on top. It's really good, but you don't
oh,
it saves me from having to like slice up my chicken. So go to
yeah. No, that's
Aldi.
a good tip. That
Yeah,
reminds me of.
it comes in like a good container too. It can last you like a week.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
I'll have to look for that next time.
Yeah, you should.
Yeah, I
Mhm.
think for me, chicken, is like I love my chicken like fresh off the stove. I just feel like it tastes
Oh.
so good. So I'm a little like spoiled in that way. But I
I
do
understand
love
that.
roti chicken too, so I'll have to look for that. It reminds me at Costco, they used to have something similar. They would have like grilled chicken strips and grilled chicken like diced up. It was a really easy way for me to have chicken on the go, to add to my salads and have extra protein throughout the day too.
Yeah.
Um, but I digress. Um, so on my so I'll always have that prepped. So whether that's like from the store or just like sitting raw in the kitchen, in the fridge, whatever works for you.
Yeah. Also, you said having like all the macronutrients throughout the day. Like for breakfast, sometimes it if I'm not making an omelet, sometimes I don't know how to get those fruits like those vegetables in. I guess fruits I could eat, but like eating vegetables in the morning for me, I feel like other people can relate to this, but I don't know, I just can't it's something about it. Like I usually if I make an omelet, I put spinach in it if I have spinach, but anything else eating vegetable, like, I know you said you eat sometimes what you had the night before.
Mhm.
Like, is it just you have to get used to it, used to doing that? Like, how do you
Yeah.
are you just you eat fruits to, combat that?
Yeah. So when I say like 50% should come from fruits and vegetables, like that's like the ideal, right? So sometimes if you know that you have a hard time getting vegetables in the morning and fruit is easier, great. do that instead. And then
Yeah.
just make sure you have more vegetables later in the day. You just want to make sure, again, your habits make sense with the protocols that you have for your nutrition. Um,
Mhm.
but if you are trying to increase your vegetable intake, a really effective way is just smoothies. So if you have like, I don't know, um, like a typical smoothie recipe could be like a base of coconut water or almond milk, and then you can add like a protein powder to it. Um, I like to use like vanilla base because it blends the best with lots of different flavors. But you could add like spinach, like you said, or kale. I've seen people add like carrots and celery, like broccoli, all sorts of things. But if you blend it up really well, you can like come up with really great recipes that taste really good and it doesn't really taste vegetable forward, especially if you add fruits into it too. So
Mhm.
I would suggest that. But majority of my clients who get veggies in the morning it tends to be either in smoothies or like with eggs, like omelets, like you said.
Yeah.
Um, Sometimes people will have, like, fried rice in the morning, so, like, in Korean culture, like, omurice is a really popular thing, so you'll mix in, like, diced up carrots, sometimes celery, peppers, but it's, again, like, there's an egg on top. Sometimes not, but, that's another effective way, just, like, getting some, like, egg fried rice in the morning.
Yeah. Wow, I love that. And what about like snacks? What about, if you're in between meals, what are some examples of some snacks, like healthy snacks that we could eat?
Yeah, so if you are well, my favorite snacks, I like the chopsticks or like there's like I think it's called chef's jerky or chef's cut beef jerky. That
Mhm.
a lot of athletes will eat too, but beef sticks are really helpful to get extra protein in throughout the day. You always want to pair that with again like a source of fiber, a source of carbs. So having like a piece of fruit with you. Dried fruit works too, can be really great. Some nuts and seeds. Um, I also like to have like protein bars in hand. So I always encourage clients when you have shelf stable snacks like this, stock up your car, your purse, your backpack, your locker room, because you never know when you might need it. So I
Mhm.
always like to make sure my athletes are like having emergency snacks at all times. Um, there are some, snacks that some of my clients have told me about that I think are great. Like, there's a brand called Poshy. They have, like, marinated vegetables. I've never had them, so I can't attest to how good they are, but some of my clients enjoy them, so that's a good way to get vegetables in as you're snacking throughout the day. Um, if you've seen the Sargento snack packs, those are great too because it has, like, the crackers, the
Yeah.
cheese, and I think usually has, like, some sort of, like, deli meat in there. So, I always think of them as, like, adult Lunchables. P3
Okay.
packs are also really good if you haven't had those.
What packs?
P3 packs, have you had those before?
I think I have actually. Yeah.
Yeah, those
Yeah.
are my athletes' favorites, and when I would stock up the locker rooms, like, I would snack on them too, they're so good.
Yeah. I'm going to try those again. I have had them before, but it's been a long time. But they are like good for like just getting a little snack every now and then. Yeah.
Yeah. But generally speaking, if, it's not like a shelf stable like snack that you're having on the go. You can even have like a smaller version of a meal. I think when people think you have to have breakfast at breakfast, you have to have lunch at lunch, etc., that's like a social construct. Like I
Mhm.
joked earlier, like I have leftovers at breakfast. Sometimes I have pizza in the morning, but I just make sure throughout the day it's balanced, so that the majority of my foods are coming from whole foods, whole grains, minimizing the processed foods, the high sugar foods as much as I can. But I still like incorporate like foods that I want to have too, because you don't want to suck the joy out of eating either.
Yeah. Okay. That's good to know. So we talk about a lot of the healthy foods, but like, what about the unhealthy foods that you like to, you know, enjoy and they're like your comfort foods? Like, how can we indulge in those every now and then and not feel bad about it? You know, it's like the cheat meal or like you said earlier, everything in moderation. Um, how do we manage, eating the healthy, but the ones that we know aren't healthy, but they're just good?
Yeah. So I always talk about how food is not just physically nourishing. There's a lot of like cultural, relational, social ties to food too. So, for instance, if you're just focused on clean eating, and I know like in your other podcasts, you've talked about how sometimes you have to sacrifice things in order to like get what you're striving for. So,
Mhm.
sometimes you might be a little bit more diligent with your diet, for instance, than like on a regular basis in season versus off season. So, there, like, you have to think about the time but also think about how sustainable your current behaviors are. So, for instance, if you're thinking, okay, I have to eat super, super clean for X amount of time, is that going to make you swing the other direction where, okay, I cut out all these foods and now I can have them? I'm going to have them in excess amounts and almost go the opposite way. So,
Mhm.
oftentimes I've been guilty of it too. Like, it's very easy to swing from one extreme to the other. So I always encourage, hey, rather than doing those extremes all the time, why don't we try to just have a middle ground of even when you're like in season, how can you still honor those cravings on occasion? Um, so I generally incorporate and encourage an 80-20 like mindset. So 80% of the time have the foods that, are generally physically nourishing. 20% of the time, are you actually honoring the cravings, your emotional, mental health too? Food is very important for the physical body, but don't forget, hey, are you allowing yourself to eat out with your friends? Are you cutting out social interactions all the time? Are you not indulging in birthday cake every once in a while? Like, you still want to enjoy life, right? Even if you are competitive and you have aspirations.
Mhm.
So everyone's middle ground is a little different based on like where they're at in their career and what goals they have in mind, but it's just something to consider, like to always strive for balance rather than writing off huge lists of food to restrict for like the end of time. I used to
Yeah.
be that person. So I
Mhm.
know from experience how it's not great long term. It's almost never sustainable and it causes like you to have a bad relationship with sugar or fast food or whatever it might be. So I always encourage, let's try to avoid that as much as possible.
Yeah, I love my Chick-fil-A now.
Yeah, Chick-fil-A, yes.
I mean, I gotta have it every now and then, Ugh, gotta get those points on the app. Okay, I digress. But to that end, though, like when you're talking about restricting foods, like I know a lot of with pro cheerleaders and aspiring pro cheerleaders, sometimes you can have a not so great relationship with food and that can lead to eating disorders. Can you talk a little bit about how you can avoid that? And I think you kind of touched on it earlier when you talked about like the 80-20, like 80% nourishing foods, 20%, comfort foods. But how can you, I guess, better your relationship with food as a dancer?
Yeah, so when I'm addressing this topic with most of my clients, I always circle back to, hey, how's your relationship with your food, your body, and exercise? Because if you ask yourself that regularly, it can help you understand like where your mindset's at. So, for instance, like, and it happens to the best of us, if you're focused on achieving a specific goal, you might get so hyperfixated on it that you forget the bigger, broader perspective. So, for instance, if you're aspiring to be a professional dancer, you do need to like, take care of your diet and have a good balanced approach with exercise. But if you're cutting out everything that like gives you like rest and meaning, you might not enjoy the process long term. So for instance, if you are always eating super super clean and forgoing like eating out with your friends, spending time with your family, you have a lot of anxiety whenever you do go out, that can, like maybe indicate maybe you should get some help to like talk through why you might have increased anxiety or um like have like your mindset always be thinking about food. That's another thing that can help people consider like getting help, for instance. um, I always mention that everyone's bandwidth is 0 to 100. So, of that 100% bandwidth, what percentage of it are you thinking about thoughts of like food, body, or exercise? If that starts to be consuming like the majority of your like mind throughout the day, if thoughts of food, body, exercise are the majority of what you like are thinking about, what stresses you out, hey, maybe we need to tap into that. Why is it that these things are on your mind all the time? What can we do to kind of lessen that, like control just a little bit so that you have more of a balance between like being regimented and disciplined while still like having self-care and compassion for yourself in the process.
Mm,
Um, the other thing that I'll mention is at the end of the day, when you're striving to become a professional athlete, professional dancer or cheerleader, performance is what's most important, right? So if you're eating in a way that's impacting your physique, you might look great, but are you performing at optimally? So
mm,
looks are part of it, but your performance is too. So you want to make sure you're educating yourself about how to properly use nutrition rather than following all the food myths out there. A
mm.
lot of those myths out there often encourage very disordered habits or very restrictive like eating, which isn't always going to be great. So you want to do your research and go to the proper resources, the proper individuals to help you better understand how to optimize nutrition without resorting to like excessive like extremes.
Wow. Yeah. No, that's really deep. And I feel like we could talk about that for like hours, literally, eating disorders. And I like that you say if you're thinking about it a lot, then that's a sign that you should probably, um, reevaluate your diet and how you think about, what you're eating, and what the actual goal is. So no, thanks for sharing that. One of the last questions that I feel like just comes up in conversations with my clients is how you can make your abs pop. Like I know you can eat like sour gummies and you can make your abs, I mean, you can make your muscles pop doing that. Um, and I know that's not always the best way to do that, but I've also heard of like asparagus is good for like reducing bloat and but if you're a pro cheerleader, likely you're going to be in a two-piece. Or if you're a college athlete, a college dancer, you're going to be in a two-piece and your abs are going to be showing. So I know from experience when I was, doing college and pro, I wanted my abs to look good. I wanted to look good in my pictures. So what are some foods that can do that? Besides, I guess the ones that I mentioned, or you can confirm or deny.
I've actually never heard that. I'm gonna have to look into that. So
Okay.
you said Sour Patch gummies and asparagus?
Yeah, that's what I've heard. And I mean, I've tried it before. The Sour Patch thing is like sour gummies make your muscles pop for some reason. I think a lot of the I got that from one of my friends who does like the bodybuilding competitions or aesthetic competitions. And she says like before she goes on stage or like hours before she would eat like, a Sour Patch gummy, a handful of them, to make her muscles pop even more. So yeah.
Huh. I'm gonna have to research that. I'll get back to you about my thoughts about
Yeah.
that.
Okay. Yeah, I would love to hear your thoughts.
Yeah. But I think for me, from like what I know about making your abs pop, like when you use your muscles, you develop a muscle pump, right? So when you go to the gym, like if you did an arm day, like your biceps will look a little bit more like pumped, and so if you're trying to make your abs pop, for instance, I know for a lot of bikini prep shows, like a lot of people behind the scenes will be like doing glute exercises and whatnot to pump their muscles to make them look more exaggerated. So if you're trying to make your abs pop a little bit, one way to make them pop is like do some ab exercises before the picture or like right before the event or whatnot. Diet wise, literally what I talked about before can help. So avoiding high like fat foods and high sodium foods, processed foods, that's definitely going to help lower the inflammation. When you're trying to lean out just a little bit, like lowering inflammation, that's where I want your mindset to go. So rather than trying like so so for some people, like off season, before a competition, before like you're auditioning like months out, we can work towards body composition goals to like lean you out and make the muscles pop a little bit more. But when you're thinking short term, you can't necessarily think about getting rid of body fat per se, because that's temporary, that's a crash diet. So rather, what can you do to lower inflammation so that I can optimize my current body for that specific audition, if that makes sense?
Mm,
So again, anti-inflammatory foods, making sure you're hydrating properly, making sure you're watching your sodium content. Sodium is honestly like where I would encourage you to start for many people because oftentimes our sodium intake is way too high. So
Mhm.
just keep tabs on it. If you keep tabs on sodium for like even a week, a lot of people notice a difference in how they feel with their inflammation. And like your muscles will start peaking out just a little bit more too for a lot of people.
How much is too much sodium intake? Like what should you go up to?
Yeah, so the daily recommended amount is around 2,300 milligrams. So I believe that's about like like I don't want to say the wrong thing. It's like a teaspoon or a tablespoon. It's about um a half of a teaspoon.
Okay,
Uh,
half a teaspoon.
so it's very little. I feel like was it half a teaspoon? That's what AI is telling me right now. But I want to double check that. I'll get back to you and double check it. Um,
Okay.
but essentially, it adds up. So like look at like the breads that you have. Breads will have salt. It doesn't have to taste salty for it to have salt in it per se.
Yeah.
A lot of like
Mhm.
beverages will have sodium in it. But think like if you eat a lot of processed foods, that's definitely going to have a lot of salt in it. Um, Many Americans will exceed 2,300 milligrams to more closer to like 4,000, 5,000 milligrams. And if you have too much sodium, it's gonna lead to like heart issues and blood pressure issues. So, um, hydration and watching sodium intake is definitely something you just want to be careful of. Like, try not to add too much salt to your cooking. Watch like look at the nutrition labels for how much sodium you're having throughout the day. But I also want to add in, like, especially for athletes, dancers who are dancing for 4+ hours out in the hot sun, like
Yeah.
you're gonna need sodium. So I say this to address like the general population. Hey, sodium is something most Americans get too much of, but for athlete populations, you actually might need more sodium. So
Mhm.
depending on like look at the context of your day. Are you a heavy sweater? Are you out in the hot sun? Do you need to be hydrating more properly? Then in those circumstances, you might need more sodium. If you are um, like sedentary, maybe you're not working out, maybe you're off season, just watch like what you're eating. Maybe you're eating more processed foods when you're off season, for instance. So just watch your sodium intake there. So it's
Yeah.
all about like considering your context and considering like what your overall like needs are based on that.
Yeah. Wow. No, I love that. That's yeah, it's like that balance, you need sodium, but you don't want to have too much of it. Yeah, it's like yeah, give or take.
And
This has been
that's
what?
why working with the dietitian's great because we can do that math for you. Hey,
Oh
this is
yeah, for sure.
you.
I mean, I'm not a math person. Like, I would love for you to do that for me. No, this has been so great, Sarah. I really appreciate it. I didn't tell you this before, but we're going to do some rapid fire, just some quick first thought that comes to your mind, type of question and answer. Does that sound good?
All right, let's do it.
All right. So I think I might know the answer to this one, but your favorite food, healthy and unhealthy.
Mm. So healthy, like physically nourishing. I would say like I told you spring rolls. I'm on a spring roll kick right now. So I'll say that. Favorite indulgent food.
That's a better word.
Ooh,
Indulgent.
yeah. I would say I'm on a peanut butter kick right now, like specifically Reese's.
Ooh,
So we just made some Reese's chocolate chip cookies last night. So that's been
that's fun.
on my mind a lot.
Yes. Making me hungry. What is your favorite fruit?
Strawberries. There's literally pictures of me when I was younger, like eating like huge strawberries at the kitchen table.
Oh, that's cute. And then, I think, is it strawberry season? I don't even know. Maybe it's already gone. It's like
I think
apple
it's in
season
the
now.
spring. Yeah, it's apple season right now.
Yeah, I love fall. I can't wait. What about your favorite vegetable?
Oh, bok choy. Have you had bok
Oh,
choy before?
I think I have, but I'm not sure. Is that the little cylinder type of
It looks like I
little
don't know
plant
how to
at the
describe
top?
it. It looks like a bulb almost. It's like round, but then it has leaves at the top.
Oh,
And like
uh-huh.
it's used a lot in like Asian cooking. It's great
Yeah.
in stews. I eat it in stir fries, but it's a cruciferous vegetable. So it's like in the same category as like kale, broccoli. And so it's really, really good for like women's health too. So bok choy is my favorite currently,
Need
but
some
it's
more
always
bok
changing.
choy. Need some more of that in my diet. What's your favorite way to energize before a workout?
Ooh, either putting on like my favorite podcast or music. Right now I've been reading a lot of books, so I sometimes use like books to motivate me for like long runs. So I just like zone out like listening to it. But I would definitely say like whatever I'm listening to, that's what best energizes me.
And this leads me to my next question. I have to have a question in here about like dancing or performing, but who's your favorite artist or performer of all time?
Oh, gosh. That one's hard, but I know. Don't come at me, but I think Chris Brown is a really good performer. Like, have you seen
Oh,
him live?
he is. Yeah. I wouldn't come at you for that. I would love to see him in concert. I heard his concerts are amazing. Like,
Yeah.
I just see it
Emilio,
on social media.
Emilio, my fiance, he used to see him like when he back in the day when he was younger, and he would tell me like he's like the best performer ever. So he took me to see him like 2 years back, 3 years back. And so I was impressed, but Emilio was saying even that was just him like phasing out. He was like even better back in the day. But I would
Oh,
say
wow.
Um, they're like Beyonce's performance was like amazing.
Yes.
Uh yeah, I think yeah, there's when it comes to performers like making like quick decisions like that, I'm like,
No, it's okay.
there's
There's so
so many
many.
I could name.
So many. And then what about like you talked about your favorite, you want to energize before a workout by listening to music, but like do you have a favorite hype song?
It depends. Right now I haven't really been listening to music all that much. But if I pull up my Spotify right now, um I was with my parents over the weekend in Denver, and we took them to a Brandon Lake concert with Phil Wickham, which is like a Christian concert. But
Mhm.
that's not necessarily like hype music for a workout. Um, let's
I feel like
see.
I have Apple Music and sometimes it takes me to like my favorites or like my like recommended station. So
Oh
sometimes,
yeah, yeah.
yeah.
Have you heard of Forrest Frank? He's been like trending a lot. He's also a Christian like artist, but
No.
music's really like upbeat. I really like him a lot. It's really catchy, his songs too. Um,
What's his name?
Forrest Frank.
Forrest Frank. Oh,
Yeah,
okay.
he was actually in Charlotte like a couple weeks ago. He's amazing.
I'm gonna check him
Um,
out then.
yeah,
Some Christian upbeat music.
yeah. And then I think I have like Friday on here.
Friday, I think he's really good. Yeah. I don't know about hype music, but
But like I said, when it comes to music, I don't know, like Emilio, my fiance, he always controls the music, so I just like vibe to his. When
yeah.
it comes to my playlist, it's like all over the place.
It's okay. I mean, Christian music is a good like inspiration type of like workout music. Um, do you have okay, so okay, what comes to mind when I say the word diet or nutrition?
Um, so diet, I remember my seventh grade teacher telling us that he asked us, "Hey, who here in this classroom is on a diet?" And like literally nobody answered, right, raised their hands. But actually, he was like, "No, every one of you should raise your hands because everyone is on a diet. When you're eating foods, that is a diet."
Hmm,
So that's what comes to mind, like just that little
I love that.
like little exercise from seventh grade.
I love that.
Nutrition, I think of I don't know, I just think of like the grocery store, like and not just like the produce aisle, like literally the whole store. There's so many treats in there. Um and anything can be included in a nutritious diet. It's just about balancing what you're craving versus what your physical body needs. So that's
Mm,
what comes to mind there, grocery store.
good. That's good. What's your favorite Charlotte restaurant?
Okay. Have you been to I think it's called like Fin and Fino?
Yes.
So I think Emilio took me a few years ago, and I still dream about their pasta. I don't know what it is about their pasta, but I was just super impressed. They had like really good fries with like this like seasoning on top too.
The truffle fries.
Yes.
Well, they were so good. I don't think they have them anymore, which is crazy because that was the best thing on the menu.
Yeah, it was
Mm.
really like really good. We even went back there and like bought the seasoning because we were so good.
Really? Oh
Yeah.
gosh.
We tried to make it at home, but it's just not the same.
Not the same. Not the same. It's like the Red Lobster like biscuits. Not the same
Oh
though.
yeah, not the same.
What is okay, last question. Your best piece of advice you were ever given when it comes to diet?
Everything in moderation.
Everything in moderation.
I
Hey, I
think
like that.
Yeah, I think I've had my fair share of try and crash diets. I've done the vegan thing, I've done the restrictive thing. Like a lot of dietitians you'll find, and again, this is blanket statementing, but a lot of dietitians get into this field because we think about food all the time for a reason. And out of all the things and crazy things I've done with my diet in the past, like everything in moderation is what has kept my health the best, my
Yeah.
performance the best, my mindset the best, rather than following these like fad diets. So
Mhm.
if that's you, I've been there. So there's a better way to it. So try considering everything in moderation rather than like super, super strict.
Yeah, it's just straight to the point. It's like everything in moderation. That's what you think about, when you're making those decisions about food. Yeah. Thank you, Sarah, so much. This has been amazing. I've learned so much, and I hope that whoever's listening has learned a lot as well. But I want to say that September 18th, we have a Q&A to go over everything, well, not everything, to go over anything else that you want to ask questions about that maybe we covered here, you have a question about, or you have a question in general that we didn't cover here. But do you want to talk a little bit more about what that session will look like, Sarah?
Yeah. So you all here are listening to the podcast. It might be your first time listening to a dietitian. You might not know what a dietitian does, but essentially, like on September 18th, we're going to open up about like a 60-minute session where I'll tell you a little bit about the basics of working with a dietitian, what signs and symptoms to look for when you're not sure how your nutrition is or whether you need to be more attentive to it. But then from there, you can ask questions about anything I talk about there or anything that you want to follow up from our session today or any of the resources we're going to put out in the coming weeks. So it's really like up to you. It's your first chance to, ask a dietitian any questions. If you have specific questions, that is more than welcome too. But I encourage you all to come so that I can meet you all and answer any like relevant questions.
Yes, I'm looking forward to it. And I know people are going to come with some great questions. So, where can people find you, Sarah? I know we're going to be seeing a lot of you, but I want to make sure that people are getting connected with you even before the 18th, even before our next podcast, whatever we have going on.
Yeah, so you can find me on Instagram. That's typically where I'm most active. I'm not the best. I'm not an influencer by any means. I am just on there. I try to provide resources. But you can find me specifically SkimDietitian. And then my private practice is Skim Wellness.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Sarah. This has been so great, and I can't wait to continue our conversations about diet and nutrition.
Yeah, thank you so much.
I don't know about y'all, but I learned so much in that podcast episode, and it was so much fun doing it with Sarah. I have so much that I took away, so here's what the takeaways are. Only use medicine if you really need it. Let your food be your medicine first. Number 2, to help with portion sizes, start with the palm-sized portion of protein, 2 palms for fruits and vegetables, and a palm-sized portion of starches. Number 3, increase carbohydrates if you have low energy. Number 4, if you want to gain weight, have breakfast first thing in the morning. If you want to lose weight, eat between 3 to 4 hours a day. Number 5, protein makes you feel satiated, meaning the more protein you eat, the less you might eat because you'll feel fuller throughout the day. This helps if you're trying to build muscle, lean out, and lose weight. Number 6, opt for leaner versions of ground meat. Number 7, the day before an audition, eat whole grains, and the day of, fuel your body with simple carbs like applesauce or a granola bar. Number 8, whey and casein protein powder are a complete protein powders and often is better for your diet than pea protein or plant-based protein, which doesn't have the full, complete proteins that you need for your body. Number 9, if you need to find a way to eat more vegetables in your diet, set a goal to eat most vegetables during one meal during the day. Then reach the ideal portion, which is every meal during the day. Number 10, 2,300 milligrams is the daily recommended amount for sodium. And finally, number 11, performance is more important than looks as an athlete, even in aesthetics-based sports. All right. Thank you so much for listening. On September 18th, like we mentioned in the show, there will be a Q&A via Zoom that you can join. It's free for anyone to join. And Sarah's going to be there to talk about nutrition and answer any questions, any follow-up questions that you may have had from this episode, and just any questions that you have in general about nutrition. She is, like I said, she's a registered dietitian, and she is the official dietitian for the Professional Cheerleader. And so if you have any questions about working with a dietitian or specific nutrition questions, then come ready to ask those with us and with me and Sarah, mainly Sarah. So thank you so much. And as a reminder, the Professional Cheerleader membership is open and you can join whenever. We did start this week, but you can join as soon as you are ready. It's a 6-month commitment. We do virtual classes and strength exercises for dancers and technique as much as we can do virtually. And then in person, every month we go across the floor. We learn a combo in person, and we are together as one community. So I really hope that you were able to join the membership, because it's helped get someone on an NBA team this year, and it's helped others move forward even past rounds that they did in previous auditions. So be on the lookout for more on classes, and let me know if you want to sign up for the membership. All right, I hope you have a great rest of your day, and I will talk to you later.
Thank you so much for tuning into the Imperfect Cheerleader podcast. Taking the time to listen while you're busy with all of life's responsibilities means the world to me. If you enjoyed this episode, here are a few ways you can support ICP. Number 1, hit the subscribe button so you always get newly released episodes and never miss them. Number 2, take a screenshot of the episode you listened to and tag @theprofessionalcheerleader on Instagram. We love to repost your tags and shout you out in our stories. Number 3, write a review. This is the best way to show your support for the podcast and helps us bring on even better guests, interviews, and topics. I hope you have a wonderful day, morning, or night, wherever you may be, and are continuing to work towards your goals of becoming a professional cheerleader, dancer, or just someone who loves to move. I'll see you later on another episode of the Imperfect Cheerleader podcast. Remember, stay frosty, friends. Toodles for now.